Hey folks, sorry I'm late. Hard to get people to stop talking on meetings. You're like, I gotta go. Let me bring up the meeting notes. Everybody can hear me, right? Yeah? Okay.
Yep.
Let's see, we're looking. Okay, then Zoom. Okay, so share screen. And apologies for not doing the agenda this morning. It's been quite the day. Okay, if you haven't signed in, please feel free to sign in. I was starting to put the date March. What can I do today? At today. I'm trying to put at today, but it's not letting me. Oh, there it goes. Got it. And okay, quiet crowd. How's everybody doing? Nothing. Come on.
Going all right. I just my job has very quickly become write a bunch of articles. So
Yeah. I wish I had that ability.
Any consolation, I enjoy reading the articles you write, so
Yeah.
you at least have an audience of one who appreciates.
Okay, so please do sign in. I don't know why this looks weird here. For folks that don't know, I think Jay knows because I can't ever make the S2C2F meeting because I volunteer during that time. I volunteer for, it's called a math pentathlon or something like that. It's coaching little kids on like strategic math games. And so we have a math competition this weekend. So it should be pretty fun. So I'm kind of excited about that. Yeah, you would think it's like there's math. There's not really any math. It's more strategy games. And they're a lot of fun to play with. Let's see, but it's probably going to be chaos. Crazy thing is, like, they make the kids sign in at 7:30 in the morning. These are kindergartners. It's like, come on, they're kindergartners, and it lasts till like 1 or something like that. And playing 5 different games. It's pretty.
It's
pretty
a
cool.
long day for kids that age.
It is, but I think the reason why is because they're so young that there's a lot of breaks in between, right? So each, like, it's 15 minutes to just like play one game. And so then you have all these kids and they'll snack and they'll talk and, they'll wander off and they need bath break. So I think that's why.
I say work them. Yes.
Yeah, I hear you, Laura. Okay, so for today's agenda, I wanted to go back over some things from last week. So did anyone have anything new to, well, first, newcomers. Is there any newcomers? I always forget. Any newcomers wanting to introduce themselves? No? Going once, going twice? Okay. Are there any agenda items that people want to bring up first before we kind of go through some of the items from last week? No? Okay. So one of the
I'll
big things.
just
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just do a quick shout out for in a couple of weeks at KubeCon EU. There's going to be a security village area, and so there's going to be open like a open what is it called, like the unconference style session for a couple hours. And so if folks are interested in stopping by, we'll have conversation tables out. We'll have different things like that. Definitely, I'm hoping to bring up different things like salsa and fresca and other things like that on top of the other cloud native security things that we're all interested in. So if anybody is around or know folks who are attending, please send them that way.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
On my end with that, I'm finalizing some, perhaps a bit of it is an unconference, so it's nothing like super official, as in like it's not going to be, it's going to be very laid back. But the idea is going to be potentially taking also some CNCF projects and trying to salsify them. A lot of them are already using GitHub actions, and hey, just add this GitHub action in, and you're, at least salsa 0.1 will get you to 1.0 in a few weeks. But the idea is, I think, to show folks how easy it is to get started there. So there's going to be some stuff on that. It should be really fun.
Nice. I'm wondering if we can try doing that part of the demo, right, for that talk that got accepted for OSSNA, right? So yeah. So is that at the same conference, Mike?
Yeah, it's all KubeCon. Yeah, it's KubeCon EU.
Okay. Got it. KubeCon EU. You said unconference, so I was like,
Oh yeah, we're calling it the Security Village or the Unconference.
okay.
Because the idea there being that everything else is going to be lots of talks. There's going to be a section of the KubeCon hallway that's just going to be booths and tables and stuff like that, so that folks can just sort of sit down and we'll have a couple of screens up and just be like, hey, let's sit down and actually have some hands on keyboard, hack away at things. Here's what a supply chain attack looks like. Here's how to prevent it. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. Awesome. Any other things to bring up before we start on some topics from last week? I think, Mike, you said updates on blogs for you. We can get to that if you want to go next.
Sure. So a couple things. One is so the Fresca stuff, based on some feedback, some general feedback from last week's Fresca meeting. I rewrote a good deal of it. It's back up. Looking for once again, feedback on it, because as kind of we said, hey, if we want to make this thing, if we want to make Fresca, whether it's just this is a shining example, or if it's, hey, this is a project that people should be able to deploy, we need to get more folks and more eyes on it. And so wanted to get some additional thoughts, especially from folks who are like vaguely familiar with Fresca but really aren't sure on it, about some of the stuff, because as I had sort of mentioned before, is I see Fresca showing up in a lot of presentations, but when it comes to actually getting contributors to it, it's been a bit difficult. And so if it's valuable to folks, hey, let's see what we can do with it. If it's not, we can kind of go and say, okay, not every project is successful. Mm-hmm. But I know that, with some of the stuff we had discussed, hey, there's a lot of stuff we're going to be talking about Fresca, but it's going to be hard to talk about Fresca if not naming names, but some folks have moved on to other projects and other things. And right now it's mostly just Mike who's holding, and a few other folks who, in their spare time are holding the line on it. But a lot of folks aren't doing the 9 to 5. So that's Fresca. The other blog article is the sort of split, the breadth and depth of salsa. Mm-hmm. That kind of goes into a little bit of the build versus source, and that was something that was brought up after you had left, Melba, yesterday from the specification meeting. Okay. Was, hey, do we want to combine these things? Yada yada. I'm okay with combining them or whatever. I don't go deep into the details on, mm-hmm. Outside of just the high level, like the build is about the build. The source is about the source. And so the build takes in source code and does stuff with it. But if you combine the two things, it becomes more complicated to say the build takes in source code. That source code could be trusted if it follows, let's say, a salsa track eventually, or it could be untrusted. But salsa, but the salsa build piece did what it was supposed to do. And that's kind of the output of that article I wrote. It's up There's actually I have a PR up for it.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I got notified about it. I forgot about that.
Yeah, let me go in. Let me go in and link that here. Where
And
is this?
May
Tracks
I
blog.
jump in? Is this one that I think for the Fresca, I don't believe that I'm aware of. I can go back and check, but I don't believe we've posted anything about it on the OpenSSF blog more generally. So I think this would be a great one of those that it would make sense to coordinate and post both places.
Sure. Yeah. This was also like we were even like looking at this just more from a, hey, does this make sense to folks? And then let's figure out what the avenue for publishing it is. Yeah, it would be great if it was up on the OpenSSF blog. Yeah, this is kind of going to be a bit of a call to action for folks of like, hey, if you think, if you care about, secure builds, and you care about like, how can I have a secure, an open source secure build that does stuff like S2C2F, Salsa, so on. Here's how here's a build system that can do that. But I think the thing that we wanted to start doing is kind of saying like, hey, given that a lot of folks who were originally working on Fresca had gotten moved on to other things, we're looking for additional contributors, additional maintainers, folks who are interested in helping shape the project. And I think the two main things that I listed in that article, we're looking for hands-on keyboard contributors, like folks who can actually write some of the code. But in addition to that, we're also looking for folks who they have the need. They're like, I need a secure build system. What are your use cases? Because we would love to be able to start hitting those use cases.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Jennifer. So should we submit this in some special form for the OpenSSF to review?
You can just the best way to do it is to just email it to myself. I'll drop my email here once it's ready, and then we'll want to make sure the working group leads or I don't know, is there a point person for Fresca? Is
Mike?
Okay, well then I guess you've reviewed it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the thing here, right, is I do think like I want additional feedback on the what is Fresca. Particularly like, yeah, I mean, if it's just like simple typo fixes, that's fine. But I'm kind of more interested in some of the high level, like I read this and I still don't know what salsa is. Because given that I've been so deep in the in it with Fresca, I can I might not what's the word? It's like when you've been staring at the thing too long, it's that sort of thing where it's like somebody else comes in and goes, oh, that doesn't make sense. And you're like, oh, you're right, it doesn't make sense. I've just been staring at it so long that I don't know what it's like to be an outsider looking in. So yeah, definitely looking for folks to come in and help out there.
So for the salsa tracks one, I remember we also brought this up, like we would have to coordinate. I have not had a chance to look at that pull request. The reason why I'm going to not be in the meeting tomorrow is the reason why I've not been able to do any of this. Well, after tomorrow, I'll have more free time. But we were thinking along the lines of, it is more high level than build versus source, right? We really do want people to understand when you look at different scenarios, how it actually makes sense to separate us or why it makes sense. Because if you just say, build is just build, source is just source, sometimes people just don't get that. So Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about whether or not we combine the two. But I did notice when I was working on an unrelated PR yesterday, the Salsa 1.0 proposal actually has a breakdown of the split between build and source levels and the rationale. So I could, it might make sense to me to have I just dropped the link in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
If we want to combine the blog posts, we probably don't need to write too much about the split because we can always link to the official rationale that we ratified whenever this was.
this isn't enough though. That's the
No,
problem.
no, it's not enough, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, this is, yeah, I've read through this, and I think even with this, people still have that question, at least what I've seen. Not sure what others have seen in terms of the feedback for this, but I feel like people don't get it. And maybe it's a visual thing. I'm a visual person, so if I don't see a picture, I don't understand it. It takes me a long time to understand it. So maybe that's why. So Mike, Chris, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my general thought is, and so I agree with you there on the pictures. I would add pictures to mine if I had the time to write the pictures. I think the thing that, yeah, I know based on a lot of the conversations, I do find that, like, I think the proposal's good. I think, yeah, as everybody knows, like it's you know, we want also some of that, like, he doesn't have enough of the, like, the why, or like the history and just sort of the general, like, flow of what, you know, folks are looking for in there. And I think the thing that, when I've spoken to some folks, the thing that people have brought up has been, they're looking for just sort of the general, like, oh, like the super, you know, 100,000 foot level of why we split those things up is you can have a secure build without secure code, and you could have secure code run in an insecure build. And we wanted to say, hey, those two things are separate. Yes, at a higher level, you want to have secure all the things, but you could secure one thing without securing the other, and it helps prevent certain types of attacks versus other ones. And that's kind of, you know, why we split that up.
Chris?
Actually, I was just about to lower my hand.
Okay.
I agree with Michael. I'm happy to have the separate blog post with more detail.
Okay. And with that said, I know Chris and I have been working on that build versus source. I'm not going to talk about that right now. We might be able to talk about it later. My copy and paste is just not working for me today for some reason. Copy, and it's every time I'm sharing on Zoom. This system is messing with my copy paste. There it goes. Okay, anything else on this topic before we go on to this also 1.0 comms plan, which was definitely in my brain, just didn't write it down, Jennifer.
Great minds.
Okay. Okay, comms plan. So Jennifer, did you want to
Yeah, sure.
lead
So
us?
yeah, so I think I'd really like to get help from this group, kind of determining the overall messaging for that we will use in the press release. I don't know if is there a link. Yeah, there's a link to it in this document where it started, but I think there were some good conversations here a couple weeks ago about what the calls to action should be and kind of some of the main themes. So I think fleshing those out would be really valuable and help to shape that messaging to meet the goals, right?
Yeah. Yes, I think that would be good. I know we've had this on the agenda for a while, and we did add some stuff, so it makes sense to go through it together as a group to just kind of hash it out.
And then the only thing I'll add there was hoping that we could get a good working draft of the press release by the end of the week. So by the end of March, around the 31st. Still have a little bit of time to collect quotes, but I think getting us a good draft and moving us in the right direction will help guide us to the finish.
Okay. So for folks that kind of raised their hands last time for quotes, how many of you are still going to provide a quote? And if you are you in sync with Jennifer?
From active state, still happy to give a quote. Jennifer, I can send you a couple different drafts if you want. We also wrote a blog and a white paper, which I'm happy to share and might help with some of the positioning stuff if that is useful too.
Cool. Definitely.
White paper.
If you want to, feel free to check in with me, but if you also have have your quote finalized, feel free to drop it directly in the doc. I just shared a link in the chat.
Yeah, and I know for myself, right, I'm kind of relying on Jeff Borick, who is, the overall
touch.
OSPO. Yeah, and so I've told him, the messaging, and so he's dealing with the legal stuff. Like, I don't want to have to deal with any of that. You can go do that. So I'll sync with him today for the IBM quote.
Wonderful. And then if there's any other end user types that folks think would be good to include in here, currently the only confirmed sort of quote of this type is GitHub. So if we can find a few more companies that might want to provide those, I think that'd be great.
I thought Verizon not going to do it?
Without digging into the details, it seems like they're
Oh.
not planning on it for this one.
Okay, got it. Okay. Generic Google. So Chris, do you know on your side who's handling the quote?
I do not, but I saw a mail thread where there are people working out the details. I just don't know them.
Okay, got it. And then Red Hat, Laura, do you know? Even though IBM owns Red Hat, we are very much separate, so we don't work with the same people. Laura, do you know?
So I was on PTO last week, but the last I heard, I thought Kathleen and Emmy were working on a quote, but I can confirm that this week.
Okay. Laura.
I mean, if there is a quote, and I mean, I can put it in there.
Okay. Is that what you want, Jennifer, for us to just put the quotes directly in here?
Yep, I think that'll, unless there's a question or, happy to answer any questions, but yeah, when it's ready, just drop it right in.
Okay, awesome. Anything else, Jennifer, on this? And we can technically make this a working session to just finish this out in terms of the goals and the message. Unless you wanted to touch on something else.
I think that would be a really good use of time from my perspective.
Okay. So I remember the last time when I was taking notes, we said in the spec today there was build system, package manager, ecosystem, and then consumers. But we as a group were talking about, some of these profiles which may align, may not align. So from the group on the call, thoughts on what should stay, what should go, what should our focus be for the 1.0 comms? Come on, you can come off mute. We're not going to bite.
Is that the list that we're looking at here?
Yes, correct. And then I can try to zoom in a little bit. I don't know how to get rid of this thing. Oh, there it goes. So this is what's in the spec today. And this is what we proposed. I think it was like a meeting or two ago. I can't remember. Because the build system, I feel like, are the tool makers, potentially the tool owners and sysadmins, right? They are responsible for the build system, but also they're responsible for this. But that's just my take on that. Quiet bunch today.
I mean, I think it looks reasonable. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the majority, like the highest level folk, like the folks we're really trying to hit are really those we want folks to both want salsa, right? Because without the desire for consuming salsa, you know, you might have a few initial folks who will implement it, but then that'll be it. So we really want folks who could, you know, so we want like it is a bit of a chicken and egg thing, at least from my perspective always, is like getting that initial desire while also getting, you know, the desire only lasts as long as you can have folks who also implement it, and folks only want to implement it if there's a desire to have it implemented. So I think those are probably the most important is just, hey, we want folks to want salsa because we believe having that provenance metadata is really, really useful for supply chain security. And then we want package manager, you know, folks within, you know, obviously organizations as well as open source. And this is a thing that I've been working with. There is a group here called Securing Software Repos working group that have a lot of folks who are from like Ruby Gems, PyPI, NPM, and so on. And I know they're very interested as well. They, I think, want to be able to see also that there is that desire that people are saying like, oh, I would love if Ruby Gems had a way for me to pull down salsa attestations related to those Ruby Gems. And so I think, you know, when it comes to just sort of the general, what we want to get out there, it's showing that there's desire on both ends. Like, yeah, there's desire to implement this thing and there's desire to actually consume it.
I'm taking notes here. It's not necessarily a talking point, and I'll just move it. But since I'm in here,
Yeah,
both.
I would, I mean, you got the CISO down there, you got DevOps down there, you got compliance down there. What I don't see is I don't see product security down there. And you know, if we're thinking anything about the pipeline, who's going to be inventorying? And so I mean, God, having been on one end of this, who's going to be, you know, doing the proper inventory of pipelines? Who's going to be making sure that pipelines are scanned and pipelines are, you know, the standardization of pipelines and all that, right? I mean, I think all that should be considered here as well. You know, at a God, dare I say, at least at a macro level, because these people could hold gate checks. I mean, they could hold, you know, respective gate checks. So so definitely security analysts, definitely product security. Whoever's doing the threat modeling, right? That's usually on the product security side. They might do some kind of threat modeling of some sort, or they may fish threat modeling out underneath the CISO's org. Product security folks don't necessarily need to fall under the CISO. They may fall under R&D in some instances, depending upon how you have your security teams broken up, right? You may have the security engineering for the enterprise under the CISO, and you may have product security people underneath some type of security, privacy, and compliance arm underneath R&D or something like that. I mean, I've seen organizations do that. It looks funky on paper, but it seems to work in some instances. So they may fish threat modeling out though to the security engineering folks just for centralization of those efforts to identify at an enterprise level where are your gaps, right? So I have them in there as well.
So, yeah, and one of the questions that I had that you actually somewhat answered is, like at IBM, product security is under CISO. How often does that happen or not happen? And it sounds like it's not necessarily the norm. They could be different arms. So what I'm not.
So sometimes it falls under the CISO, definitely, but more often than not, at least, let me put it like this. I've seen it both ways, but more often than not, I've seen that fall under R&D than I've seen it fall. I see a dotted line, right? I see a straight line under R&D. I see the dotted line to the CISO, meaning they might have a reporting arm operationally to the CISO to report vulnerabilities or report what they discover here or there. But authoritatively that they report underneath our R&D.
John?
Sorry, my cat's also jumping on top of me at the same time.
I saw that. For the
A
tail.
little tail flying by. So maybe first of all, full disclosure coming into this with the naive understanding of salsa and what we're trying to accomplish. But the first thing I think when I see this long list of implementers and consumers of salsa is like, how long is this post going to be that we succinctly address each of these categories of people? And it sounds like that could be a lot. But when I take a step back and think about my own understanding of salsa, one of the things that comes across is enabling, like, all of these people can agree on a very small set of things. One of those is hopefully supply chain security is important. It's really hard though for all of these disparate groups to talk in a consistent way about supply chain security, about even like how to define it or how to approach like solving it. I think that salsa, in my mind, like helps bridge that gap within an organization by giving us like a standard means to understand and talk about pieces and components of supply chain security, and gets even further into like how we could potentially implement some solutions to this. And so, like, rather than speaking to them individually, I've been thinking more of salsa of like how to bring everybody together, to like bring everybody to the table, have everybody a part of the conversation, and have everybody understand their role in contributing to the solution, rather than just. And I think this also goes internally and externally. So like when you're talking to a vendor, hopefully they can give you the same answer about supply chain security, whether you're talking to vendor X, Y, or Z. And the same thing internally, when you have different stakeholders, they can talk in a consistent manner. I don't know if that makes any sense or if that's helpful for this content, but that's how I'm thinking about it, at least.
Something like this, like salsa is a supply chain security language that everyone can speak.
Yes, that was much more concise.
Oh, no, it's okay. I can't type as fast as you talk. So I think that's what I gathered from your explanation. And I do like that. I think there was one of the missions, the core missions of salsa, or the positioning group of salsa, was to be the lingua franca of supply chain security, right? So that is very much the intent. I need to find that. Security. Anybody else have comments?
That immediately makes me think of the Rosetta Stone for supply chain security.
Oh, there you go. But is that gonna?
I'm not sure if that's trademarked, but I like the concept.
Yeah. Lingua franca.
One of the things that we've been saying a lot, and I think has helped some of our customers, is that it's also a way to actually position yourself or understand where you fall right now in the landscape of security, right? Like, are you doing terribly, not so bad, pretty good, great? You know, like it actually gives you some context for where you stand and a way to continue maturing.
Did I capture that right? Like, understand maturity levels for supply chain security at an organization / product level or component level, maybe product.
Totally.
One of the things, as I think when I think it was John that you mentioned the different personas and it being a very long blog post, is that we could summarize, right? Because I see these people, depending on the organization, either they're creating something that would need to implement salsa for, or they're working with a third party or consuming third party software that they would then also want to look at these salsa attestations. So potentially that's the narrative around the implementers / consumers. And we can say, for example, like the CISO and, you know, DevOps. So maybe it's a more of a summarization. And we can maybe bulletize, if that's even a word, you know, things like compliance, right? Product security is going to want to know if they are being compliant, and compliance is going to need that for their evidence for audits and blah, 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 right? And so maybe we can have some sort of, you know, summarized highlights of how they would use SALSA, or how this group of people might use SALSA. I don't know what the thoughts are on that, or if I made any sense.
I like that idea. I like showing the relevance and the value for multiple stakeholders, yeah, and groups.
Groups above. They would use, right? And so I think that's goes down to for the implementers and consumers, right? I think we can, there's some bullets in the salsa.dev, right, for the benefits. SALSA, right? Of like actually using SALSA, but then there's also, you know, things that people care about in terms of like the White House executive order. Right? I know not everybody cares about that because not everybody's in the US, right? But that's been a big thing lately, which is driving a lot of adoption of a lot of these things, right? You know, the NIST framework and the SSDF, right? I don't know what else we can put in here. I think that didn't the EU just recently do something with this space? Anybody knows?
They have the was it the this is the CRA they're working on right now, the Cyber Resiliency Act. Is that what
Yeah, and
it
they're
is?
yeah, and they're looking for feedback on it. I don't know. It's coming up pretty soon, but they're looking for feedback on it. I know a few folks have asked if like OpenSSF is going to be consolidating a feedback.
Yeah, so those are things that obviously would benefit an organization if they were to implement, right? Or if they're trying to follow those recommendations on like a consuming, like these are the things that you'd want to look for, right? So we could talk about that. Any other thoughts?
I was gonna say, I have that consolidated mapping that we're working on cleaning up. Because we, and when we initially did it, it was based on, like their very first, like 0.1. So I don't know how much has changed, but one of our analysts, Jennifer, she's taking a look at it from the OWASP perspective based on a conversation that I don't know if it was in this meeting or another meeting that sparked a discussion around whether that would be useful as well.
It could have been part of the SALSA positioning, because I know we were doing that at the beginning, but then we went down the rabbit hole of something that shall not be named because I don't want to get Jay's wrath again on that one thing.
I'll say the S word.
Yeah. I remember I brought it up, but then Jay went nuts on me. So yeah, I remember we stopped on that. So can you see if that's something that you could share? And then maybe Jennifer can take a look to see if there's a way that we can use it.
Yes, I actually have the draft. It's a public copy.
Okay.
It doesn't have OWASP yet, but it has, I believe it's, I'll put it here. Make sure you guys can access it. Okay, cool.
But this is based off of version 0.1 though, right?
Yeah, that's I'm meeting with Jennifer to see. She was going to update it. I just don't know how much how far she's gotten. She was going to, while she was updating, she was also going to add OWASP to it, to the columns.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, we'll definitely need to, I don't know that this will be ready enough or ready by the time we need this comms out.
Oh, so the comms is what, April 18th, is that correct?
Yeah, the actual press release is going to be issued on the 19th. Hoping to have a good draft of our press release ready by the end of this week. So
Yeah, that's the gotcha. And for folks that are wondering, in the comms plan right here, there is a timeline that Jennifer provided of when things are expected to be complete. So I don't know that you'll be able to have that ready by end of week, Laura.
I can let you know.
Okay. Okay, so let me.
By Jennifer, I meant our Jennifer on my team. Sorry, not.
it's a popular name.
Okay. So Laura to confirm ready for comms plan. So I'm gonna take this out. Laura, you have access to this doc. But I'll put it in here in the notes. But I'll take it out of the comms because I don't want to confuse things if it's not ready.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so then we have 15 minutes left. Thinking about the tool makers, tool owners, sysadmins, they kind of fit under the build system and package manager ecosystems. Do people agree with that? Thumbs up. I saw a couple of thumbs up. Still waiting for more. There we go. Okay, so it sounds like people are okay with that. Is there not a summary, thinking, what would you want them to get out of the message, right? Like, yes, language that everybody can speak of, maturity levels, but these are the actual people making the tools or making the build environment. So what would be the targeted message for them?
Once again, I'll eventually, but in like a week or two, maybe I'll stop giving my naive disclaimer. But currently, my thoughts on this would be that developers don't care about salsa. And or like if we want them to care, we need to make it really easy. And that's an opportunity for everyone who makes tools or builds build systems. And we've seen, I think it's worth calling out the momentum that people have already moved towards adopting salsa. Like I've never seen a 0.1 version of a specification adopted in like hardly any tooling that wasn't the person making the tooling. And like at the same time, I've seen the GitHub salsa generator, I've seen Tecton Change supporting for early for I don't know if we can call out all the different types of tooling that have already introduced support for it, but it's surprised me and been really encouraging to see how quickly folks are looking to adopt this.
Yeah, versions of that one. And I wrote something to you in the chat that I challenge that developers don't care. I'll give you the link. We were working on that. Like, why should developers care? And they would want to care, but that's a separate conversation. So that's a good point about.
Actually, Melba, I was getting ready to agree with you. The developers. So it's twofold, right? Developers, if they can get away with, developers want to meet SLOs, simple, but they have no problem, especially if you present them with the policy, you present them with the procedures, you present them with the right direction. They have no problem following that direction. It might hurt a little bit, but if everyone's on the same sheet of music, they're more than welcome to. It's only when there are exceptions, and they know that there are exceptions, that things can get a bit confusing. Yeah, so I mean, I think developers are, developers care when it's a top-down situation. If you could provide them the tools, then they're solid, right? If you're asking them to go bottom up, that's not going to happen. This bottom up ain't going to happen. Top down is going to happen. Bottom up to bottom up.
Down approach.
I would agree that and it varies from organization to organization too. If you can get like the C level and the senior leadership to agree, and there's a tie to revenue, I think
Yes.
that's a motivating factor for the developers as well. They want to get their products out the door.
I think that, so great point, right? I think part of that list should be your CTO, because if it's the revenue. So one other thing I've seen when it comes to revenue, I mentioned SLOs earlier, right? As long as there's a time to market, a first to market situation, a lot of these controls that are being presented, and this is not just, this is any framework, right? A lot of these controls being presented can provide extra time constraints on meeting respective SLOs. And if you got those time constraints, then you're not first to market. If you're not first to market, that's revenue loss. CTOs ain't buying it, right? So that's an excellent point. We may need to provide some type of understanding to CTOs that this needs to be done, and then why, right? And it can't just be because if you don't do this, then this. No. You've got to tie in some type of, it's got to be reputation impact, revenue impact, something else. There's got to be a rub to it. If we don't do this, then you're not in compliance of this, which means that you're going to end up having to pay more money later on to fix this, right? They respond to that very well. So that's something else too. I don't know how you do that with this early on.
Yeah.
Like as you mentioned, John, right? People adopting a .1 ain't there's no compliance requirement to do any of this. Everybody's just trying to jump on a new shiny thing. But what is the compliance requirement that can be met should you adopt this, until this becomes in itself a compliance requirement? That's something that might need to be investigated a little bit further. That's not our scope to do that here, but that might be something that gets done spec wise, right? That's a different conversation, because as you mentioned, a CTO needs to buy in on this.
Yeah, otherwise they'll sign off on all the exceptions.
Exactly.
Question, because this makes sense from a enterprise, small, medium business, but for open source that aren't necessarily tied to revenue, right? They're just open source developers are just doing it because they like it. How do you get them to care about salsa?
Well, if the motivation is that others use the things that they build, or then maybe that's the motivating factor. People won't want to use it if it's not secure.
I mean, you're gonna have those that will build something, right? You got your single maintainers that are gonna build something and says this is great to use. If you use it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. Somebody else will use it. But those that actually have a desire to be used in those larger enterprises, they're gonna want to meet the requirements just to be considered.
Yeah, I think we just need to be careful. Like, I think the thing that we're trying to get off, right, is as what you said, Jay, is like we're not trying to like you know, tell people who are just like, hey, I just have a random side project, you must use salsa. It's like, no, like nobody's telling you that. But what we are saying though is it's the other way around, right? We're saying if you're building a tool that you plan to sell to enterprises, don't use the random side project from some random person, right? You know, unless you're planning to secure that and do all the due diligence there, right? I think that's kind of the thing that we're trying to kind of get off, you know, get like the idea we're trying to get out there.
I don't know what I was gonna write here. I was gonna say something about the tooling. Because the tool makers may also be part of that developer conversation, right? Because the developers could potentially, like Fresca as an example, right? They would be enabling Salsa, or if they're a part of the package manager ecosystems and they're developers trying to implement it, they're a developer, right? So the tool makers might also be under that developer persona.
Yeah, I think it.
That-
Oh, sorry, I was gonna say, yeah, I think I kind of split it up between generic software engineers who are probably writing just whatever, right? They're writing, you know, e-commerce website, they're writing, you know, a logging library for something. And then there's gonna be folks who are like, you know, for example, like Kusari, right? Which is writing software for security purposes. And for folks who are writing software for security purposes, they're gonna be the folks who are kind of in that area. And then also folks who are connected there, right? You know, you might see like if we look at something like JFrog Artifactory, JFrog Artifactory did not start off as like, let's say, a huge security company, but you know, they were trying to kind of say, here's how a place to store your artifacts. But over time, obviously, that sort of evolved into a larger thing where security became more important. So I think it's folks where security is, and I guess in most software, some level of security is important. But I guess, yeah, what John said, platform, yeah, platform level of security, software producers.
That would be including the package managers ecosystem. Is that right? Yes, okay. So Jenna, I was gonna say something here and I don't remember what it was. Before I forget, comment about the. I think I put that in even in the blog that we were writing about source versus track. Jennifer, remember that survey that came out about salsa and the adoption and the value? We might want to add something along those lines in here. That, hey, you know, this is getting adopted. It is being seen as valuable. So I don't know if there's a way of putting that in there, but I think for the build versus source, I tried to say, okay, we need to put something in here along those lines. Because NIST has salsa referenced in the SSDF, right? So
Yeah, I think if we can demonstrate it as being used, that would be important to include in here. In terms of next steps, do you think it would be possible to sit down with some of you and kind of take this and turn it into parts of the press release? I'm still thinking that it would be helpful to kind of make sure that what we have there is reflective of the messaging fleshed out here.
I mean, I'm open to it. I think my calendar's just crazy. We need this by Friday, right?
At least a good working draft. Yeah, I think.
Okay. Folks on the call.
I've got
Anyone?
0 cycles for Friday.
I mean, even if it's async, I don't think it needs to necessarily be another call.
So what does that look like? Is that the press draft?
Yeah, yeah.
This release draft and just trying to take what's here and putting it in there? Is that what you're
Yeah,
thinking?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. I think after Wednesday I can start. I can certainly help. I think Wednesday, tomorrow is going to be my my headache day, unfortunately. Mike, Chris, Claudia, Laura, John.
So I'm free most, I'm free most afternoons this week, except maybe this afternoon, but.
I'm pretty tied up cleaning up the spec for RC2, but I could do small tasks in the latter half of the week.
Yeah, I can help. Afternoons are better for me generally, but
Okay. It looks like Claudia and Mike and John. John said he can help too. So we have 2 minutes left. So the ask is for, it's in the notes. I need to actually put it better. Here's a salsa draft announcement. To do async with Jennifer, try to add some comments in here, not comments, but language, verbiage around this stuff. I think we have what we need. I think we've made a decision that these are the right things. The only thing I don't know, it doesn't say implementers of salsa in the spec, right? These are consumers of attestations, but there's also consumers as they're the implementer. So they're going to actually be using. So I'm curious as to thoughts on how we position that. If we keep it as implementers, consumers of salsa, sorry, because that's not in the spec today. It just says consumers.
I'm wondering if it's 3 categories of implementers, producers, and consumers, because some of the tooling will produce attestations based off of the implementations.
I like that. Okay, so implementers, producers, and consumers. And the implementers. Okay, if you can add verbiage on that, because we're out of time. Put some verbiage around like the different personas here for each, and to make sure that we're aligned, that we're not missing anybody. That would be wording.
Yeah, and if folks can, as you have time, take a look at the draft press release and start getting some ideas in there. And I'll also be, oh, sorry, my alerts are going off. I'll also be in the document as well, so we can kind of work on. And Chris, I think you had your hand up. But
yeah, so if you look at the 1.0 working draft of the website, the personas we're using for how to salsa are right now it says developers, organizations, and implementers, but I believe that's changing to infrastructure providers, producers, and consumers.
Ooh.
1.0.
Is it?
It'll
is
be
it
on
this
the
one?
no 1.0 without the RC one. 1.0 draft.
Okay.
That's on the left-hand bar. I believe there's an open issue to change those. Let me pull that up now. But we have talked about personas that we're using on the website.
Okay, yeah, if you can put the personas here.
Yes, I'll add them to the doc after the meeting.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks everyone. I'll try to send out a summary later tonight of the action items. But I think we're coming along. Thanks, folks, for all your help. Thanks for participating and joining. See you soon.